"You've always tried to take him away from me," she hissed. "But he's mine, not yours," Emmanuella yelled at her mother. Hannah was stunned. "Emmanuella, he's your father. You are his daughter, not his wife. This jealousy is wrong." Emmanuella's face twisted in rage. "You are the one who's wrong. You don't belong here." When Hannah slapped her, Emmanuella pushed her. The pregnant woman fell, clutching her stomach as blood pooled beneath her. Welcome to Adibi Tales. Hit that subscribe button and don't forget to leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Peter and Hannah had always dreamed of having a family. For 5 long years, they faced heartbreak after heartbreak as every attempt to conceive ended in disappointment. Their prayers were finally answered when Hannah gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, Emmanuella. The moment Peter held her tiny frame in his arms, he felt a profound love he never thought possible. At the hospital, he swore to himself and to his newborn daughter that he would protect her with every ounce of his being. Returning home, Peter called all his domestic staff into the living room. "This is my daughter," he said with pride and authority. "She is my life. If anything happens to her, if she so much as sheds a tear because of any of you, you are gone." The staff exchanged uneasy glances, but Peter didn't care. His world now revolved around Emmanuella. As Emmanuella grew, Peter's love for her deepened into an almost obsessive devotion. Every cry, every whimper, and every discomfort was immediately attended to. He cradled her, sang to her, and shielded her from any potential harm, no matter how small. Hannah, although happy to see her husband so loving, grew uneasy. She saw the signs of overindulgence early on, but hesitated to speak. After all, Peter had waited so long for this moment, could she take it away from him? By the time Emmanuella turned 5, she was fiercely attached to her father. She would run to him for everything, whether it was a scraped knee or an argument with a nanny. On one occasion, a staff member had raised her voice at Emmanuella for spilling a drink. When Peter found out, he fired the staff member on the spot. "Peter, you can't keep doing this," Hannah said, her voice laced with concern. "You are teaching her that the world will bend to her will." "She's just a child," Peter replied dismissively. "She needs love, not lectures." But Hannah's warnings went unheeded, and Emmanuella's dependence on her father only grew stronger. One evening, as Peter prepared to take a bath, he heard Emmanuella crying in her room. Wrapping a towel around his waist, he rushed in to find her sobbing. "What's wrong, my princess?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "I don't want the nanny to bathe me," she whimpered, clutching his arm. "I want you to do it, Daddy." Peter hesitated. "Emmanuella, you are a big girl now. Let the nanny help you." But her cries grew louder, her face red with frustration. Unable to bear her tears, Peter relented. He carried her to his bathroom where they bathed together. It became their secret ritual, one that Peter saw as innocent but which began to stir unease in Hannah. "Peter, this isn't normal," she said one night. "She's too old for you to be bathing her." "She's my daughter," Peter snapped. "Stop making something out of nothing." As the years passed, Emmanuella's attachment to her father turned into possessiveness. She refused to share his attention with anyone, not even Hannah. One afternoon, a friendly neighbor visited, wearing a bright dress. She turned to Peter with a smile and asked, "How do I look? Do you think this dress is good for the wedding?" Peter chuckled. "You look stunning, doesn't she, Hannah?" Hannah nodded, but before she could respond, Emmanuella appeared out of nowhere. Her eyes blazed with anger as she shoved the woman. "Stay away from my daddy," she screamed. "Emmanuella," Hannah scolded, horrified by her behavior. Peter, however, laughed it off. "She's just protective," he said, patting his daughter's head. "Here is no harm in that." But Hannah's unease grew. When Hannah announced she was pregnant again, the news should have been a cause for celebration. For Peter, it was. He was overjoyed to learn that they were expecting another child after all these years. His love for Hannah deepened as he saw her glow with happiness. He went out of his way to care for her, bringing her breakfast in bed, scheduling regular doctor's appointments, and ensuring she was always comfortable. But for Emmanuella, the news hit like a thunderclap. The very foundation of her world began to crumble. For 18 years, she had been the center of her father's universe. Now someone else was coming to take her place, a rival she hadn't asked for. Her resentment simmered beneath the surface, growing stronger with each passing day. At first, she tried subtle ways to regain Peter's attention. She would sulk at the dinner table, feigning sadness until Peter asked her what was wrong. She'd complain about her studies or pretend to feel unwell, hoping her father would drop everything to comfort her. But Peter, consumed with excitement for the new baby and concern for Hannah's health, didn't notice. Then came the day Peter canceled their usual evening stroll, something they had done together since she was a child. "I can't today, Princess," Peter said with an apologetic smile. "Your mother's been feeling a little tired. I want to stay with her tonight." Emmanuella stared at him, her chest tightening. "But we always walk together, Daddy. You promised." "I know, sweetheart, but this is important. We'll go tomorrow, okay?" Her heart sank as she watched him walk away, his arm protectively around Hannah. That night, as Peter sat beside his wife, Emmanuella sat alone in her room, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she felt abandoned. A few weeks later, Hannah found Emmanuella sitting on the porch, staring blankly at the sky. Concerned, she approached her daughter. "Emmanuella, you've been so distant lately. Is everything okay?" Emmanuella didn't respond at first, but then she turned to her mother with a glare so sharp it cut through the air. "You've ruined everything," she said coldly. Hannah frowned, taken aback. "What are you talking about?" "You!" Emmanuella snapped, standing abruptly. "Ever since you got pregnant, everything's been about you. Daddy doesn't care about me anymore because of you." Hannah sighed, her tone firm but calm. "Emmanuella, that's not true. Your father loves you. He always has." "No, he doesn't," Emmanuella screamed, her voice trembling with anger. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and her whole body seemed to shake. "You've taken him away from me. You've always been trying to take him away, and now you are using this baby to do it." Hannah, who had always prided herself on her calm demeanor, felt her patience snap like a brittle twig. She took a step forward, pointing a trembling finger at her daughter. "Enough, Emmanuella. You are acting like a spoiled child. Your father is your parent, not your property. This obsession you have with him, it's not normal." The words hit Emmanuella like a slap across the face. Her wide eyes brimmed with tears for a moment, but they quickly narrowed into slits of cold fury. Her lip curled into a snarl as she took a step closer to her mother. "Don't you dare talk to me like that," she hissed through gritted teeth. "You are the one who doesn't belong here. You've always been the problem. You are the one who's ruining everything." Hannah's heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't just alarmed, she was afraid. There was something unrecognizable in her daughter's eyes, something wild and dangerous. Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to stand her ground. "You listen to me, young lady," she said, her tone rising in a mix of fear and frustration. "This attitude of yours ends now. Your father has a family to care for, and that includes me and this baby. You need to grow up and accept that." But Emmanuella's fury boiled over, consuming her entirely. Her face twisted with rage, and before she could stop herself, she let out a furious scream. "No, you are the one who needs to go." With a sudden, violent shove, she pushed her mother hard. Hannah gasped as the force sent her stumbling backward. Instinctively, her hands flew to her stomach as she struggled to regain her balance, but her feet slipped on the rug beneath her. Time seemed to slow as she fell, the world tilting around her. Her back hit the floor with a dull thud, and she cried out as a sharp, searing pain shot through her abdomen. She curled into herself, her hands still cradling her stomach as hot tears spilled down her cheeks. Then she felt the unmistakable warmth of blood pooling beneath her. Hannah's breaths came in short, panicked gasps. She reached out a trembling hand toward Emmanuella, who stood frozen in shock. The anger that had consumed her moments before was now replaced by a look of dawning horror. For a moment, there was silence. Emmanuella stood frozen, staring at her mother in shock. What did you do?" Hannah gasped, clutching her stomach as tears streamed down her face. Emmanuella stammered, her face pale. Then her expression hardened. You deserved it, she said quietly. You've always tried to take him away from me. The sound of the front door opening snapped them both out of the moment. Peter walked in, humming a tune from work, but froze when he saw Hannah on the floor, blood staining her dress. "Hannah!" he shouted, rushing to her side. "What happened?" Hannah, tears in her eyes, looked up at him. "It was Emmanuella," she whispered weakly. Peter turned to his daughter, disbelief and anger etched on his face. "Emmanuella, is this true?" Emmanuella's lips quivered, but she held her ground. "She was trying to take you away from me, Daddy. I just pushed her a little. It's her fault for being so weak." Peter's face turned ashen. "What have I done?" he muttered to himself. "What have I let happen?" He scooped Hannah into his arms and rushed her to the hospital, leaving Emmanuella standing alone in the living room, her hands trembling. Hannah and the baby survived, but the incident left a deep scar on the family. When Peter returned from the hospital, his face was pale, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and the weight of what had transpired. He walked into the house, his steps heavy, and found Emmanuella sitting on the couch, her arms crossed, an almost defiant expression on her face. For the first time in her life, Peter's love for his daughter was overshadowed by anger and disappointment. "Do you realize what you've done?" he roared, his voice echoing through the house. Emmanuella flinched at the sharpness of his tone but quickly masked it with a cold stare. "I protected you," she said, her voice calm but laced with venom. "She doesn't deserve you, Daddy. She's ruining everything. She's ruining us." Peter's jaw tightened as he pointed toward the door. "Your mother could have died. Your unborn sibling could have died. Do you even understand that?" "I don't care about them," Emmanuella shouted, standing up, her fists clenched. "All I care about is you. She's taking you away from Meshe, always has. And now, this baby? You don't even see me anymore, Daddy. I did what I had to do, for us." Her words hit Peter like a punch to the gut. He staggered back, running a hand through his hair as his heart pounded. He had always thought his love for Emmanuella was pure, a father's devotion to his daughter. But now, seeing the twisted possessiveness in her eyes, he realized the monster he had unknowingly created. "You are my daughter," he said, his voice trembling with a mix of sadness and anger. "Not my partner, not my equal, my child. This obsession you have, it's not love. It's dangerous." "No, you are wrong," Emmanuella screamed, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down her face as she stepped closer to him. "You promised to love me forever, Daddy. You said you'd always be there for me, and now you are letting them come between us." Peter turned away, his hands trembling as he struggled to contain his emotions. "You need help, Emmanuella," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't normal." Her face twisted in pain, and she dropped to her knees. "Don't say that, Daddy," she sobbed. "Don't push me away. I'll do anything to make things go back to the way they were. Just don't leave me." Peter closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. "I already lost your mother's trust because of how much I spoiled you. Now I almost lost her and the baby because I couldn't say no to you. I can't keep doing this, Emmanuella." But she wasn't listening. Her sobs turned into a wail, and she clung to his leg like a child. "You are mine, Daddy, mine! No one will ever take you away from me, not her, not the baby, no one!" Peter pried her hands off him and stepped back, his face a mask of heartbreak. "Emmanuella, you need to accept that I am not just your father. I am also a husband and a father to your sibling. You have to let go of this control you think you have over me." Her eyes darkened, and her tears stopped as a chilling calm washed over her. She wiped her face and stood, her voice eerily quiet. "If you won't stop them," she said, "then I will." Peter froze, his stomach twisting into knots. "What are you talking about?" "You'll see," she whispered, her lips curling into a faint smile. "You'll see how much I love you, Daddy. I'll make it right. For us." For the first time in his life, Peter felt fear not for his daughter. but of her. To be continued. What will Peter do next? Will Emmanuella find redemption? Subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to find out in part 2.